football show on Better Sports Network.
7 o'clock Eastern Time in the PM means it is time for Fantasy Football Night in America here on the Better Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and of course, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Follow me on Twitter at Eric Balkman. As a reminder from the FFPC, remember you can win a pair of $1 million grand prizes this year. $1 million grand prize in our mid-stakes contest, the Fantasy Pros Championship, and then $1 million in our flagship contest, the FFPC main event. You can enter in both of those. We got multiple drafts filling every single day. You will not be waiting around long if you want to join those. And don't forget, if you want to play Dynasty Fantasy Football, we have been doing Dynasty for well over a decade, well over 1,400 teams. Nary a single league has folded. That is at myffpc.com. Shout out to our producer, Anthony Rivera, tonight. And welcome in my guest co-host, a guy who is no stranger to the Better Sports Network. Quite frankly, he's on here more than just about anybody else. It's Andrew Cooper from Fantasy Alarm at Coupe Fiasco on Twitter. Coop, welcome in. Thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight.
Yeah, dude, Better Sportsman, that's where I live. But the thing is, you and I, we really only had a chance to chat during the draft. So when you said I could come on the FFPC, talk some high stakes ball,
yeah, it's going to be fun.
Had to jump in.
I'm so glad you didn't turn it down because I know the FFPC viewers, the FFPC players love hearing from you. Can you tell us right at the top of the show, because even I don't know all the times that you are on Better Sports Network?
So on a daily basis, I mean, the shows that I'm on are the Better Morning Show, that's 9 to 3. I have Coop's Fantasy Football Fiasco, that's 1 to 2 on Mondays and Fridays. I'm on the Lightning Round with Britt Flynn and Kevin Tompkins. We do the Quick Out Fantasy Football Podcast, which John and Penman and I have been doing for a long time, and that was only audio. And Matt Deutsch, being who he is, was like, hey, let's make this video. So now we got graphics, we got all this stuff, and it's the same show everyone's known and love. And then we were like, you know what? All those shows are basically from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. We just said, you know what? We're taking over the whole 2 hours. Football's coming up. So now Howard Bender and I go on, and Britt Flynn, and we do the Alarm Fantasy Football. Mm-hmm. So basically every day from 1 to 3, I'm in there. And of course, anytime good friends like you ask, I'm right here. We're talking ball, especially FFPC, because that's what I use. I'm not sure if you watch the FF Fiasco. I know I've seen you in the chat a couple of times. That's what I use for ADP, because you want the sharpest information. And the way I always look at it is, if you're always looking at the sharpest gamers, which of course, $300 buy-ins and $1 million prizes, or $2,000 buy-ins even, or honestly, you guys go up to 5,000, right?
Yep.
Like if you want to go
up to 10,000,
up to 10 now. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, if you want to take it to the limit, then this is where you play. And if you use those ADPs, then your hometown, it's like swinging with the weighted bat for your hometown leagues.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally. Yeah.
You're not going to get sniped on the sleepers because they're going early enough. Your mind is in the right place. So that's why I always use ADP from FFPC. And every year I try to win, just because, everybody knows that if you have that in your Twitter profile, right? FFPC high stakes champion, it means a little something. Nobody's out there saying, oh, Yahoo home league champion or sleeper champion or whatever. Not to name drop other platforms, but there's something special about FFPC high stakes, man. That's like that's gold-plated stuff, right?
It is gold-plated stuff. And thank you so much for the kind words. The other thing I want to add, as long as we're talking about FFPC draft, so number one, congratulations on the new addition to your family. I know that you're very excited about that. It came at a weird time of the year for you, I'm sure, but congratulations on that, my friend.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, I was able to, the baby came early. I was able to sneak out to the expo, shake some hands, say what's up. But now I'm back to being a dad. And honestly, the schedule for me, the baby's been, knock on wood, been great, because I just wrap her up. She snoozes right here, and I sit here and I type about Darren Waller. And, here's the even crazier part is that apparently they say you're supposed to listen to classical music with your baby when they're young. I don't know whether that works or not, but I always listen to music that has no words to it when I type. If there's words, I get distracted. So I'm already listening. I listen to classical. I listen to like movie soundtracks and stuff. So this baby's going to be a genius, a fantasy football genius,
Fantasy
just through
football
osmosis,
genius.
just hanging out right in this room. So,
You
so far it's working out really well.
What's funny about, you say that about the baby being born early. This goes back to 20. I'm not sure if I told this story on this show or not, if the viewers have seen it, but this goes back to 2013. Yeah, 2013. My first kid was due in October of 2013. I go out to Las Vegas for the FFPC live events every single year. So this is early September, and I got a phone call at like 7 a.m. Las Vegas time from my wife's friend who told me that her water just broke. And I'm out in Vegas, and she's back home in Appleton, Wisconsin, which is basically, just southwest or southeast or southwest of Green Bay. I apologize. And I'm like, now I got to get home. So I actually flew home, and I missed the last flight to Appleton by about 20 minutes. So I had to go from Las Vegas to Atlanta, and then Atlanta to Appleton. And I lost Wi-Fi. I was communicating with her friends at the hospital, and I lost Wi-Fi about 20 minutes before we touched down. And I'm like, you know what? I could be a father right now for all I know. Who knows? But it ended up working out nicely. There's another story of why I'm a horrible person.
Atlanta, though.
Atlanta,
of all the places.
It was very bad. I had to run to both planes just to get on. And then we touched down about 8:30 Central Time. And I walked in, and it was all good. Like, I didn't miss anything. But I'll tell you this. Are you a Breaking Bad fan, Coop?
Of course.
Okay, so Breaking Bad was going off the air in 2013. This is one of the last few episodes, and I obviously missed the original premiere airing at primetime Sunday night that night, right when I was flying home. But they replay it on AMC at like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. So it's like 3-something in the morning, and I'm heavily into this episode, and it was the shootout, right? With Uncle Jack and Hank, Asac Schrader, and Walter White in the desert, one of the last few episodes. And I'm on pins and needles watching this. Nurse comes into the hospital, and she's like, oh, yeah, okay, I think we could start pushing now. And I looked at my wife, and my wife kind of looked at me, and I could sense like she probably could if she wanted to, but I could tell that there was a little bit of like trepidation there. So I turned to the nurse. I'm like, you know what? We're good. Like, let's give it a little bit yet. And so then I finished the end of the episode just so I could see how it was a crazy town banana pants episode, right? So I finished it, and my kid was born 5:30 in the morning, totally healthy and whatnot. And that is the story of how my kid was born early.
And that's how your daughter, Hank Schrader, was born.
I didn't even think about that. We actually named my kid we named him Lucas because my wife and my sister-in-law loved One Tree Hill. But they love Lucas on that. They love the name Lucas, so we named him Lucas. But yeah, Hank would have been a great name.
That's right. Yeah,
I should have been thinking about that.
Lucas is a good name too. Do you just go by Lucas, or you use Luke at all?
I've called him Luke before, and he prefers Lucas. But it varies. Sometimes I call him Luke, and he's cool with that. I think the thing is, he's got a kid in his class named Luke as well.
Okay.
So he likes Lucas to separate. So now every time I go out to Las Vegas, I've only hit 2 of his birthdays so far. So like on the date, because I'm usually out in Las Vegas. Right. So we have a big soiree every time I get home from Vegas, then we really celebrate.
It's funny how names work like that. I was always Andrew because one of my best buddies is Drew, and one of my other best buddies was Mark Cooper. So I couldn't be Cooper at the time. But the thing is, ever since then, I got out. Once I went to college and stuff, it was just Coop all the time.
Right.
But people didn't even. Thank God for Facebook. Otherwise, people wouldn't even know I had a first name. So that's how it goes when you're Coop. But for a while there, I wasn't just Coop because there was it was a very condensed area for names apparently.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah. How that goes. All right, listen, I promise you we have a jam-packed fantasy football.
Yeah, we're talking football, I think.
Yeah, eventually we'll get there. Coop and I had to just share our life stories there. Okay, so kicking things off tonight, we're going to get into some training camp news, everything that's going on around the NFL and preseason. We'll also do our running back report. This was just going to be a one-off like a couple of months ago, and it's kind of been a staple on this show. And I think it's important because there's a lot of things to unlock in order to win your high-stakes leagues and your FFPC leagues this year by getting the running backs right. So we're going to get into that.
I'll say this about the running back report, man. I love tuning into it because, I mean, if you think about it, just about every year, there's that one guy that right at the end of, right at this time of year, the steam hits and it sticks. Sometimes it doesn't stick, but like James Robinson, league winner, straight up. And if you were there for the smoke, you caught the fire. And if you weren't, you didn't. So that's why it really is important. I love that you do that.
Yeah, and I think it's I mean, we'll get into some of the higher end running backs. We'll get into some of the mid range too. They're all equally important as we get into it. That's in hour one. Hour two coming up at 8 o'clock tonight. We're going to put Coop on the stand. We're going to find out where he stands on certain players, including Joe Mixon, John Mechie, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Not limited to those guys. We'll go all over the place a little bit here. And then the tight end whisperer, obviously, is Coop. So we can't let him get away without whispering about some tight ends. We know who the elite guys are. We might touch on a couple of the originals here, but we will get into the Luke Musgraves, the Juwan Johnsons, the Isaiah Likeleys of the world as well on the show tonight. All right, let's kick things off without further ado. The Athletic has a reporter named Zach Jackson who covers the Cleveland Browns for that publication, and he says the passing game has been completely unimpressive thus far in training camp. And I feel bad about this for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm invested, not heavily, but significantly into some pieces of this Browns passing game, like Njoku, Cooper, and Deshaun Watson. And number two, I've been telling people, I really thought that we're going to get a regression in the mean this year, Coop, with how bad the Browns offense was when Watson came back last year. I didn't think there was going to be any way that he'd be that bad again. But now the reports, and again, it's just training camp, it's just preseason, but I think we need to be seriously looking at this at this point. I was betting on a Browns bounce back, man. Now I'm not so sure.
Yeah, it looked pretty ugly last year, and it just, also throwing smoke here is the DTR coming out and having a good game the other night too, looking pretty fun. So, but I think the reality is that Deshaun Watson, he's a professional. He is a top 5 quarterback when everything goes the right way. And the reason I believe that he's going to come around and do that is that we've actually seen him in a number of different elements with good teams, bad teams, situations where it's a complete mess, and he's still good in those situations. It's not a situation where you can turn and say, okay, maybe this, like with Russell Wilson, you can say, oh, well, maybe it really was Pete Carroll. In this case, there's no one to even point at. Like, you're not going to point at like Bill O'Brien, right? Or offensive coordinators that were in and out over there with the Texans. Like, this guy showed what he can do, and I think that he's going to brush that off. But yeah, you really would like to hear more positive things coming out of there. But at this stage, it's still a little bit open tryouts. You're trying different things. You're trying to see if it's DPJ or Elijah Moore or Anthony Schwartz or David Bell. Honestly, you're figuring out if guys are going to make the team or not, right? And there was an interesting tweet from J.J. Watt that I saw where he was like, don't take any one rep as anything other than a guy, watch the whole practice and make your judgments, but don't take any one rep and make your judgment on that, because you never know when somebody's trying something new and they get burned and they say, hey, you know what? I tried that, but it doesn't work. Right. So just a different way to look at things. I'm going to give them more than, a couple joint practices.
Okay. So knowing that, and knowing that I look at the ADP for our mid-stakes championship right now, where you can win $1 million in the FFPC, Deshaun Watson, quarterback 9 at the 804. It sounds like you'd be willing to take the risk at that point with Watson, right?
Yeah, I still do. Honestly. The guy I'm taking the most of, I find, is Justin Herbert. But the problem now is that basically my the secret move for me was wait for Joe Burrow to go and then take Justin Herbert, right? Because Justin Fields would go before or after. He's all over the place. But I like Justin Herbert to potentially lead the league in passing yards this year. Now, once the calf thing happened, that flipped on some spots. I mean, what's the ADP looking like right now? Can you give me a quick rundown?
Yeah, absolutely. So Burrow is at the 501. Fields is at the 506. Lawrence is at the 612. And I skipped over Lawrence. I skipped over Herbert. Beg your pardon. Burrow 501. Fields 506. Herbert 507. Okay. Lawrence 612.
So in that in that league, unless Herbert goes before that crew, which sometimes he does, that's who I'd end up with. But I don't mind at all waiting and seeing if I can sneak a discount on whoever's there out of Dak, Watson, and Tua. The one of those three I haven't been taking as much of is Dak, because I don't like all the talk about Mike McCarthy wanted to ground and pound the football.
Schottenheimer, dude. It's like it's no Kellen Moore, and now it's Brian Schottenheimer. I don't
like it either. Right. But again, if people are going to, I kind of just take him as I play it as it lies. If people are going to let him slide, then I'll end up taking him. But And again, I have no problem missing on all three of those guys and going into the next group too, taking
Yeah.
two guys, Anthony Richardson, pairing him with somebody quote unquote boring like Kirk Cousins or Jared Goff, who, can still throw for a ton of yards. They just don't run. So we don't like them. But quarterback to me in a single QB league is fairly easy. It's 2 QB where it gets a little dicey.
Yeah, it gets tricky there for sure. What about Amari Cooper? He's missed some time with an injury in training camp right now. Amari Cooper right now, as far as his ADP goes, 402. It's about a half round after the Ridley, Metcalf, Keenan Allen territory, but it's the same. He's going basically at the same spot as Deebo Samuel, Jerry Jeudy, and DJ Moore. Does that seem accurate for you that you'd be willing to take Cooper as an early 4th round pick? Because I think based on what we've seen, not only with the injury and the passing game has been lacking in Cleveland, I think you could pivot there and go somewhere else.
I'm still in, man. I'm still in. I like Amari. I mean, last year with Jacoby Brissett, who is a replacement level QB. He's the definition, I think, in today's NFL of a replacement level QB, where he can go in and be better than some of the worst QBs in the league, but he won't be the best. And Amari Cooper had damn near career numbers in almost every category, right? He was very close. I think he was just off in yards, but he was there in targets, receptions. Amari Cooper with Deshaun Watson, it could be magic. What I do at this time of year, because I'm drafting a lot of leagues, and I wouldn't go all in with a $2,000 or $5,000 league just right now, is I put what I call yellow tape around guys. I had the yellow tape around Ramondre with all the visits going on because I was worried they might sign somebody. Anybody who's currently hurt, I put the yellow tape on. So I'm a guy, I don't like to play Dr. Fortune Teller. I'll draft Michael Thomas all day long, as long as he's healthy right now. I'm not going to predict that healthy guys get hurt, but we have the luxury on August 17th, for the most part, of not drafting guys that are currently hurt. So Rashad Bateman's going to be out with a foot. I'm going to hold off. Amari Cooper's got an issue. Certain guys, Miles Sanders has a groin right now. For this week, I'll hold off. But when it comes crunch time in, early September, very late August, when I'm doing all my most important drafts, when I try to do them, that's when I look and say, okay, are they healthy? Are they not? And if Amari Cooper's healthy at that stage, I'm drafting him. Definitely over a guy like DJ Moore. I don't know if you've seen any of the Vegas lines for Justin Fields, but they are pouring some cold water on a bit of the hype regarding the passing. I mean, I've been looking at. I saw one today. I don't want to name drop any sites or anything. I don't know. I don't know what your sponsors are or anything like that. So, but I will say that one site had a guy like, for instance, Josh Allen had him set at like 600 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, and 4,300 passing yards, and like 32 passing touchdowns. And they had Fields. The rushing numbers weren't far off. They're very similar. 7 rushing touchdowns. I think it was a little higher rushing yard number, but he was set at 2,980 yards, like 1,400 fewer yards. They said, yeah, I know that's 175 yards a game for those that want the quick math there. And I'll tell you this: if the quarterback's throwing 175 yards a game, I don't want a single wide receiver from the team, and definitely not one going at what'd you say, their 5th, 6th round.
Yeah, 5th round. And I think this is interesting, Coop, because, and we'll pivot and talk about the Bears here a little bit. Again, I never like to put words in the mouths of my co-hosts here, but I'm going to ask you point blank here. DJ Moore, Chase Claypool, Cole Kmet, even Mooney, all those guys, are they kind of off your board? And when you see something like that, is it on automatic, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe it's set this low. I'm eliminating these guys. I'm going to let somebody else take them completely.
So for me, the top dog is usually almost always off, but the one guy I am taking stabs on very late, last round pick, believe it or not, is Chase Claypool. And everyone hates when I say that. So people, your listeners out there, they can hate when I say it too. But I went back and looked at it. You look at the games that these guys played together. They traded for Claypool, 3 games getting ramped up under 40% of the snaps. The next game where Claypool was finally ramped up and played almost 70%, Fields was out. Then they finally play 1 game together, and Claypool gets 6 targets, catches 5 of them, but hurts his knee in the second half of the game. So still didn't play a full game. Then it's bye week. Claypool doesn't play for a couple weeks. Then Claypool comes back, and what happens? The Bears shuts Fields down for the last week. So they basically played 2/3 of 1 game together, and Claypool got 6 targets. So I look at it and I say, hey, we haven't even seen it yet. And of course, the memes are funny. I enjoy the memes, right? The fact that that turned into a first round pick, that's objectively hilarious, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think the memes and the narratives may have driven that way too far, way too far. And we've seen the same thing happen before, where DJ Moore was going wide receiver 9 in 2020, and Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel were going wide receiver 64 and 65, and it turns out the targets were spread a lot more thin, and those guys were values and he wasn't. I mean, so Moondog, he's coming off a big injury. Claypool's the one that I'll take a stab on. But again, this is a last round pick and the first guy I drop if he doesn't do anything week 1.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's a good case for a 20th round pick, right?
Right.
Because he's basically free, and you pointed out all the reasons that there could be bigger time upside this year, for sure. So that is interesting about the Bears and the numbers for Fields, though, for sure.
It's brutal, man.
Treylon Burks was in the news, Coop, and not for a good reason. He had an MRI done. He sprained his LCL, and he's going to miss the next few weeks. Now, I know a lot of people early in drafting season love getting Burks. Then the Titans got Hopkins. Then Burks got hurt, right? So, like, now you look at him, and over the last couple of days in our mid-stakes championship right now, you're looking at Treylon Burks falling to an ADP of the 904. Yesterday, he went as late as the end of the 10th round. On average, he's going off the board at wide receiver 47. Does this represent a buying opportunity for you for Burks? I know it's a weird situation because it's a low volume passing offense. He's obviously at best the number 2 target on this team now, but is now the time to grab Burks? How are you reviewing this situation? Could this injury actually be a good thing for his fantasy football value?
So personally, I'm not doing it in FFPC where the roster spots are too valuable and the gamers are too sharp. But I am doing it. A guy like this, if I play on like a hometown league where you can put guys who are out, not on the IR, into IR spots, I don't mind that at all, especially the leagues where you can hide these players and keep them. And it also now creates one of my favorite situations for another player on the team, which is Chigakonkwo. I always preach this for my last bench spots. Claypool, a perfect example. We'll see if he does anything at all. Too many people will fill their benches, especially with their last couple picks, with handcuffs and guys you need to wait too long on. Like if you're using, and I know Burks is too high of a value player, but like maybe even a Jameson Williams, if you're in a shallow league and use your last bench spot on Jameson Williams or a handcuff RB, and then you need to drop somebody, you might drop that player before anything even happens, before you even see what you're going to get. With a guy like Chig now, with Burks missing a couple games, now you can use a last pick on him and see what you get, see what it looks like with no Burks. And if he's popping, if he's flashing, if he looks great, you keep him. If he's doing nothing without Burks there, now you know who you can drop, and you gave yourself a chance with an explosive player, right? And I'll tell you this, there's another tight end that fits the same criteria that we're going to talk about in segment 4. So how about that for a little teaser? That's a little teaser from somebody who's on Better Sports Network like 7 hours a day.
That is a professional tease, ladies and gentlemen, from Lupe Fiasco. So obviously I meant to ask you this. This is a Lupe Fiasco like parody, right?
Thank you, bro.
Okay,
I was on with Colton and the Wolfman, and they were like, "What does it mean?" And I was like, "Lupe Fiasco," and they were like, "What does it mean?" And I was like, "He's a rapper," and they were like, "Oh, okay." You know, I love Colt the Wolfman, but that's not their bag.
No,
so
it's not.
They were actually a little disappointed. They were like, "I got to know what the fiasco is." They said this during the break on like a series show. They were like, "Tell us about what the fiasco is." And I was like, "It's not in it. There is no fiasco. I guess maybe the fiasco is, when I tweet about Sam Howell and everybody gets really upset. Like that's a fiasco usually." But no, it is Lupe, dude. And the thing is, the serious producers, they do get it. So I'll go on their show, and the intro for me will be like a Lupe song.
Right.
And Golden Wolfman are just right over the top, dude.
That's, it didn't click for me right away, but I was like, this is probably like, I don't know, 6-7 months ago. I was listening to some random Spotify playlist and Lupe Fiasco came up. I'm like, Lupe Fiasco, just like Coupe Fiasco. Wait, did he get that from that? I bet he got it from that. That makes
there it
sense.
is, dude. Well, that's the thing. It's my go-to usernames are Coop There It Is, which was already taken. That's my Reddit name. And then my other one on like Xbox and stuff, I don't mind shouting out. If you play NHL or anything like that, or Call of Duty, hit me up, is Sauce McFloss. That's what I always use on there. But both those were taken in 2000. Twitter was brand new and people were already on those usernames. So had to pivot, had to make the pivot.
You made the pivot. It was a good pivot for sure.
Looks like we got a question in the chat. Should you hit
Yeah,
questions?
we're going to do that right now.
Okay,
so
cool.
I'm assuming Come On Fam, who's watching us on Twitch, it looks like.
Nice.
Come On Fam has a keeper question. He wants to know, should he keep Ramondre Stevenson at the 801 or Josh Allen at the 512? He got Josh Allen at the 503 last year. Quarterbacks usually go late in his league. So unless I'm reading this wrong, to me, I would suggest that it's Ramondre Stevenson is who you keep, right? Because then you keep that 5th round pick. You can use it on whatever. I know Josh Allen is elite, but Ramondre Stevenson, even with the addition of Ezekiel Elliott, I still like him this year quite a bit. And I know there's people that are actually happy about Elliott going there because this cements Stevenson as still having a high volume workload, maybe not as many goal line carries as he'd like. But I like keeping Stevenson here and just forfeiting your 8th round pick rather than keeping Allen and forfeiting your 5th.
Yeah, honestly, these keeper questions get so much easier when you just turn them into trades, like you just kind of did. Turn into a trade in your mind where the trade is: would you rather have Josh Allen and an 8th, or would you rather have Ramondre Stevenson and a 5th?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you're giving the other one up. Give me Ramondre in the 5th. And also, just by the nature of it, it looks like you can keep the guy for the same round you kept him for. Like if he took Josh Allen the 5th and gets to keep him for a 5th, if you can keep Ramondre for an 8th perpetually, then he could continue to have value for a long time. If it does change, or if you only keep him 1 year, that might change the question. But like Ramondre might be right back to being Ramondre next year when Zeke is gone.
And if quarterbacks go late, maybe you don't get Allen, but maybe you get Burrow.
You could be fine.
Maybe you get Herbert. Maybe any of those guys there. So I think that's a smart way to play that. Jordan Addison has had an interesting season thus far as a Minnesota Viking. He gets ticketed for speeding 85 miles an hour over the speed limit. And now he is in the concussion protocol. He had very light symptoms. He could be back as early as Monday, according to Kevin Stefanski, the head coach for the Vikings there. I would imagine that this doesn't affect him for the regular season at all, Coop. But when you look at his ADP and where he was going, Jordan Addison, obviously going way later than Justin Jefferson. He is basically a wide receiver 38 at the 7-11 right now. End of the 7th round. Does that strike you as too early for a rookie receiver like Addison? How do you view the Vikings offense sort of in general and how it relates to Addison?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be highly consolidated once again. The thing with Addison is that there's always that concern in the back of your mind that KJ Osborne somehow miraculously, I don't think he will, but somehow miraculously gets the full-time snap share. Because anytime a team has a fullback lurking around, and dude, the contract they gave Josh Oliver, I still doesn't make sense to me, but tells me he's going to play. He's going to play a lot. Like if you give a guy that, they made him like the 2nd highest paid free agent tight end. He almost got the same amount. He got the Dalton Schultz deal with multiple years, right? Like crazy. So that guy, I mean, let's be realistic. You pay a guy $6 million a year. What's the snap share for Josh Oliver looking like? No less than 40%, right? 50%, maybe?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
Well, that vaporizes the wide receiver 3 on that team. It truly does. Or it makes it so that Addison and Osborne have to rotate now, which is kind of gross. So I do have a little bit of concern there. But again, the upside of how excited they were to get this guy, and these are the same people that picked Justin Jefferson, it's still worth a stab at ADP. It's just a matter of there going to be enough targets there between JJ and Hawk and then a third guy. If they're the only team in the league last year to have 3 guys get 100 targets was the Minnesota Vikings. So maybe, but it's, last year Hawk got traded to the team late. So I don't even know if it counts, but if I was going to let me throw a big question back to you real quick. If you were going to bet on teams to have 3 guys get 100 targets, this one is probably one of them. What other teams would you maybe consider for something like that? Like where it would be consolidated enough that you would even, I know it's a tough bet to make because it rarely happens, but like what teams would fit the mold?
It's a good question. Chargers, I would say.
Yeah.
Normally I would have said the Cowboys with the addition of Cooks, but because I think that they are going to try to run the ball a lot more.
Yeah, the new narrative.
I'm probably taking away the Cowboys.
Seahawks are interesting.
The Seahawks, I could see that. What
JSN.
about when you just talk about just pass catchers in general? I mean, wouldn't the Falcons fit that mold with Pitts and London and now Robinson this year too?
True. Yeah, that's true. I mean, the guy from The Athletic came out saying that he expects 300 touches for Bijan, and you don't get 300 touches on the ground. That was, the Priest Holmes days are over. He's not going to, but you get there with a combo of rushes and receptions. So yeah, I can see that one. That's a sneak. And you know what's really interesting about that is I've actually done a study on this because a big tight end guy, I'm trying to figure out, like, is it possible? Is it possible to rank the guy third and have him still have high end upside? Spoiler alert, not really. But the vast majority of the team, a ton of the teams that do it, it's only like 1 or 2 teams a year, but it often is a team with a running back. It's been McCaffrey, Curtis Samuel, and DJ Moore. It's been Odell Beckham, Sterling Shepard, and Saquon Barkley one year, right? So the RB mixing in is actually one of the oddly easier paths to do it. So that is an interesting one.
That's a sneaky one right there for sure. Russell Gage is out for the 2023 season. Coop, does this affect I don't want to really talk about the guys behind him because I don't think they're fantasy worthy, but how does this affect guys like Godwin and Evans? Do you see some of the targets that were going to be dedicated to Gage going to those two guys, given that the wide receivers behind Gage are not nearly as talented or as experienced as Godwin and Evans?
Well, here's where I think with this, and you know me, so I'm obviously thinking, how is this affect the tight end? But I look at Dallas Goedert as a handcuff plus, where you start him, he has standalone value, but his value goes nuclear if either wide receiver gets hurt. So he's kind of a double handcuff plus. Well, I look at Cade Otton now, who earned that job outright as a rookie, very rare feat, and Cameron Brate, we expected him to be the pass catcher and Otton to be the blocker. Otton was just kind of the guy. So if either Mike Evans or Chris Godwin get hurt or traded midseason, which we're seeing more trades now than ever, now Cade Otton comes on the radar as a guy no one's even thinking about. That what happens if he ends up being the second target on the team and it's him and Mike Evans? Mm-hmm. Like now they got nobody else over the middle with no Russell Gage or Chris Godwin. So certainly interesting name to think about. He's more of if Goddard's the handcuff plus, he's just the handcuff. He needs the injury. You're not just going to start that guy, maybe in like a DFS, but like something to think about now.
Another thing to think about now is Jameson Williams, where he was already going to be suspended for the first 6 games of the season. We knew that. He hurts his hamstring in practice yesterday, and Dan Campbell said earlier this morning that he's probably not going to play for the entire rest of the preseason. Now, this means that he's not going to be on the field at all, not getting valuable reps. He played 50-plus snaps in their first preseason game. He's not going to be available to do that. In fact, we will not see him now until week 7 of the NFL season, and he's already going to be behind the 8 ball, not only catching up from an injury, but catching up from a suspension and coming into a situation where everybody else will be in midseason form. Going to be very difficult for Williams to do so. Coop, normally at the end of the 10th round, that's where he is plummeted to, Jameson Williams. I saw him go last night in a draft with the FFPC high stakes draft. He went at the end of the 12th round. And quite frankly, I think there's a pretty strong argument to letting somebody else take him this year. Is that the way you see it? And if so, who is the beneficiary in Detroit for those targets?
Yeah, this stinks because I really liked Jameson Williams coming out of college. Like I had him as my top wide receiver. He was the best wide receiver before the draft and everything. Like, he was the best wide receiver. Well, not before the draft, before he hurt his knee. He was the best, and they still traded up and took him. But there's all that, and also very sneaky quote from like February that broke my heart as a Jameson Williams fan is at the end of the season, Ben Johnson, somebody asked him about Jameson Williams, and he said, I just wish that he was a little farther ahead. And he's like, I just wish it clicked a little faster. And I'm thinking to myself, what do you mean? What hasn't clicked? It's February. You know what I mean? He's been there for 9 months. Like what hasn't clicked? So now you worry about that. The gambling thing is actually probably the least of the worries, right? Because it's like, betting on baseball in a hotel room, whatever. That's whatever to me. He didn't know the rules. If he doesn't know the playbook, that matters a little more to me personally. So to me, the only place where I would consider him honestly is his job right now, at least, is to get back healthy and stretch the field. Right? Jared Goff is very good at dinking and dunking, and they got him a million places to do that now with Gibbs and and ARSB and Sam Laporta, so his job is to stretch the field. Maybe in best ball, that's a spot where last year, he had 2 plays that were both 40 yards, maybe there. But I don't know. Are you willing to go in on a Marvin Jones or a Khalif Raymond? I can't help but look at the Bills and Lions and think that maybe for 2 teams that are favorites to win the division, that maybe they didn't do enough, right? Like, look at the Chargers. They went out. They already have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and Josh Palmer looked good filling in. And they said, we're not messing around with this at all. And they went out and drafted Quentin Johnston and said, we're just going to have too many guys in case someone gets hurt. And I feel like the Bills and Lions sat back and they didn't load up enough, I can't help but feel that way. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've been saying to everybody this year that I am not a believer in the Lions or the Vikings defenses, which means I'm a believer in guys like Jefferson and Hawkinson and to a degree Addison and definitely Osborne late in the 28-round best ball. Kirk Cousins for sure. I don't know about the running backs there, but Gibbs, Laporta, Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit, no question. Now, the thing with Williams is I was sort of still in on him up until this injury, and now he's missing the rest of the preseason. I think you can make a case for a super late pick on Reynolds or Raymond or Jones. But I don't think any of those guys are going to give you the spike weeks that you really want. So I don't know what their value is in best ball. I still remain high on the Lions and Vikings offenses. It's just a really difficult sell for me now on Detroit, on anybody not named Goff, St. Brown, Gibbs, or Laporta. The rest of them I'm just kind of fading.
Right. I mean, Goff is, I give him credit. All James Williams does need to take the top off because I give them credit for recognizing what he does well and leaning into it. I mean, this guy, remember that stretch with Tyler Higbee where Higbee just went nuclear, just 100-yard games after 100-yard games with Goff? They just said, hey, you know what? If this guy can death by 1,000 cuts, let's just give him 1,000 guys to throw to. So I appreciate their leaning into that, but I don't know. I don't know if Goff can get it to Marvin Jones or James Williams.
That's a great point too. Oftentimes we see like these limited quarterbacks, and I think Goff is one of them. Like he'll do what you tell him to do, but he's not exactly the greatest and most talented innovator on plays broken down. But he'll be able to get the ball to Gibbs, St. Brown, and Laporta. After that, it gets a little bit dicey. I think you might be asking him too much. Are we asking too much of Rashad Bateman right now in drafts? He's out of practice again today with the foot issue. He continues to fall in draft scoop right now. Rashad Bateman, as I look at my ADP list right here, as far as where the Baltimore receivers are going, Zay Flowers has a commanding lead there. He's going in the mid-8th round, the 806. Bateman is now an early 10th round pick. Beckham has fallen to an early 11th round pick. Your thoughts not only at Bateman, but the ADP values of those other Ravens receivers and an offense this year that should be more in tune to passing the football than they have in years past.
Well, that's the thing is it's a double-edged sword, this change in offense, because the old offense, the one time they did throw a ton, the top 2 targets got absolutely peppered in Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews. And that was because they used the fullback so much. They used the fullback. Patrick Ricard playing last year, he played like the whole game. He was playing like 60% of the snaps, 60% of the snaps, and he's not soaking up targets, right? So the ball, obviously gets concentrated to the top couple guys. Last year, if they threw a ton in that setup, that would be the perfect setup for Bateman. I really liked Bateman a lot last year. This year, Patrick Ricard reportedly is actually working out with the offensive lineman. He's there. Wow. Todd Monken, they paid the man, but there's no spot for him in the offense. So he's going to be a Nick Boyle. And I went and checked it out. He actually played a decent number of inline snaps last year. They would move him around a decent amount. So he's going to try and do his Nick Boyle impression or Darnell Washington impression in Todd Monken's offense with Mark Andrews as the Brock Bowers. So now we're going to see more, one tight end, one real tight end and 3 wide receiver sets, and then maybe a little bit of that. And it makes it that much more dicey for Bateman because if it's not just going to be one wide out and Mark Andrews, it's going to be him competing with Beckham, competing with Zay Flowers. So it is scarier. And right now, like I said, I already mentioned his name as a guy I'm not taking until he's healthy. But if his ADP keeps sliding and then they come out and say, hey, this guy's 100% ready to go, I'll take him because I like the player. I'm nervous about all the moving parts and about the foot because the foot goes all the way back to last year.
when you talked about this earlier in the segment too, when you talk about putting yellow tape, the caution tape around these guys, right? At what point does it become a big concrete wall around them where you will choose not to tape them at all because they're still hurt? Is it 2 weeks before the start of the regular season? Is it a week before the start of the regular season? Is it 3 days? Like, at what point do you take the tape down and put up the cement?
It's when I get to it, each league I do has different parameters. Like I said, this is the FFPC high stakes talk here that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So in these leagues right now, if I'm doing one, those walls are up.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm paying $2,000 to buy in, you can't have every player. We talk all this time, especially, it's best ball and redraft that's got us thinking like this is, the portfolio and the exposures and all that. But you got to think about right now at this time of year, we should be talking in terms of your big hometown league where there's just one draft and there's one league and there's 20-year-old trophy and all the pride's on the line. There's just too many options at that ADP to put that on Rashad Bateman. So that's what it comes down to. Now, if we're talking about if I'm on FFPC, and I know you guys have leagues as low as $5, right? So if I'm just throwing a million darts, then I want exposure to all these guys, and I'm drafting the yellow tape guys. That's why there's yellow tape there. Some guys are just completely forget about them from the start for me. So Bateman's one of those guys right now where if it's a very important league, I can't risk it. But if we're just doing best balls or throwing darts or in a dynasty league, I'll go and grab him at a discount if I can right now. So he's a guy I like, but a guy that scares me versus guys I like that are healthy, and there's just too many of them out there.
Right, and that makes sense. Like, especially when the guys that are going around this guy are healthy, it's tough to make a case to take the hurt guy. We're going to wrap up this segment right now, but before we do, we're talking about the Ravens receivers. Jack Senzon in the YouTube chat wants to know our thoughts on Zay Flowers in Dynasty. I did grab him in a few rookie leagues, and I was pretty happy about. He is basically going about a round and a half to 2 rounds earlier in Dynasty startups with the FFPC than he is in redraft right now. I mean, I like him. I think there's a lot to like. I don't think Odell Beckham is long for Baltimore. It certainly doesn't seem like Rashad Bateman's long for Baltimore. It could be Flowers and Andrews and Jackson there for the next 3-4 years. And I think that's interesting there. Zay Flowers, wide receiver 32 in FFPC Dynasty startup drafts. Yeah, I'm in at that point.
Yeah, and shout out Ann Dunn, shout out Jack Senzin. They was our fantasy alarm crew. I finally retweeted.
Jack, I'm sorry for butchering your name. It's what I do.
Those guys, I've done a million drafts with Jack and Ann too. They're awesome. So that is a great question. Zay is a guy that I'm in on, and I was in on him before the draft. I'm a Patriots fan. Not sure if you see some of the memorabilia behind me. You got Brady, Pedro, Marcus Smart with the flowers on top of him. Rest in peace. But speaking of Flowers, Boston College guy, he did everything right during the draft process, put on weight, good weight, looked good. And then he got drafted early. And the thing with the Ravens, you have to remember is with this change in philosophy, they're no longer just looking for the next Willie Snead. That's a really good run blocker, right? They need guys for the air raid. So if they go out in the first round and take a guy to fill out the air raid offense, I want that guy. And to be honest, when I look around and we talk about path to targets for these guys, and they go back to back to back, they went back to back to back to back in the NFL draft. So draft capital kind of throw it out the window a little bit, right? Like Quentin Johnston, he is an injury away from high end, right? Mm-hmm. He's the guy where he's more of a long-term guy. You're waiting on Keenan or Mike Williams to age out a little bit, unless Herbert goes absolutely nuclear, which is possible. And then you have JSN, who could, again, with Mike Evans and Tyler Lockett there, he could go a bit of the Chris Godwin route, where he's out there in 3 wide receiver sets, but kind of comes out for some of the 2 wide receiver sets. We even saw it in the game last week. Nathan Janke pointed out he didn't play any 12 personnel sets. And then, of course, you have Addison, who we talked about earlier. But Zay Flowers, I mean, what's stopping him from potentially leading that team in targets right away or being the top wide receiver with Mark Andrews being Mark Andrews? I mean, the ceiling for him immediately, the barriers aren't quite there the way they are. There's no Justin Jefferson in his way, right? There's no Keenan Allen in his way. So Zay Flowers is actually a pretty interesting player for sure.
He's very interesting, and he gets more interesting for the FFPC drafters. I think, Coop, it wasn't 3-4 weeks ago, maybe more than 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, the Ravens receivers are basically all in the 10th round between Flowers,
Right.
Beckham, and Bateman. It was kind of just like personal preference. Now we have seen a distinct separation with Flowers moving up there for sure. Hey, the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription plus the Fantasy Football Draft Guide and Cheat Sheet is available right now. In fact, when you start a free 7-day trial of Fantasy Alarm's All-Pro subscription, and getting a lot of great stuff from Andrew Cooper to boot, you can get the Fantasy Football Draft Guide and Cheat Sheet for free. Go to fantasyalarm.com/draft, fantasyalarm.com/draft. We're going to step out just for a little bit. When we come back, I promise you a lot of running backs to talk about. Jonathan Taylor no longer with Indianapolis, at least in a physical sense. From a contractual sense, he still is with the team. We're going to talk about Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook. Ezekiel Elliott, Ramondre Stevenson, we'll get into that, as well as the Ravens running back situation, the Falcons running back situation, Tyler Algier getting 170 touches. Interesting. And then, of course, Javonte Williams. Does Coop think he's still going too low, or is he just right, like Goldilocks, trying that porridge at the perfect temperature? It's the Better Sports Network that you're watching. High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Andrew Cooper from the Fantasy Alarm. We roll on next, right after this.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show with Eric Balkman.
I say this real quick on Davante Adams is that if you go over to the FFPC, that's what we've been talking about. They're good friends of ours, and they have expert drafts where like that's where the big dogs be, right, Joey? Like that's where if you want to do like a $300, $500, $2,000 league with not that many people in it, where the winner gets $1 million, like where you're, I mean. If you lose, you lose $2,000 though. But I mean, that's where if you want to play high stakes, that's where you should go. And when I look at the ADP over there compared to other places, Davante Adams is going farther down than you would expect. So when some of these other sports books have him at 1,300 yards, which is right where they have Justin Jefferson, right where they have Jamar Chase, for him to be going where he's going, I mean, Jefferson goes 1, Chase goes 2, Tyreek Hill's also at 1,300 yards. He goes 4 over there. He's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Wide receiver 10 after Amon-Ra St. Brown, after Garrett Wilson. Those guys are some of the sharpest of the sharp. I know the ADPs are very close between him and Garrett Wilson, but you got to take that into effect. And if you like Davante Adams like I do, what you should do, go over to FFPC, myffpc.com, sign up, use promo code ALARM. They'll match an instant $25 when you deposit 35 or more. And take advantage of that, right? Like now that I've seen his ADP, I like him. I'm going to go over there and take him over there. Joey, you don't, so maybe you don't. But I mean, wide receiver.
I'll join the league with you though.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's split. Yeah. Well, maybe not $1,000. $1,000 each. You want to go? Maybe we'll do.
I might get in a little trouble for that.
Yeah, well, dude, the thing is, they have leagues as cheap as $5. They have best.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, maybe we'll do like a $50 one, $25.
Okay, I'll split a $50 team with you.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. Let's lock that in over at FFPC.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, you get Davante Adams and I get Samaje P. Ryan, and then we'll just be fine. We both get a guy, and then we'll draft.
I think that's fair. An equal amount of draft capital used on both, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah, check that out. I noticed that one, that FFPC, and that actually goes to the two you guys' point. Like the high stakes guys don't like. So that's a little scary too.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think the high stakes guys are really sharp.
Yeah, where you were saying he was going as a wide receiver 10, like while I'm passing on him, I think that's fair. It's people taking him as like the 4th and 5th. Like I'm out on that.
Yeah, which you can't do. I've seen it too, and I sometimes with guys like that, I like that when that happens, where I just like, oh, nice, somebody reached for that guy, and now I don't have to think about it because he is a little scary, right? It's like. So I actually sometimes like when guys get reached on and I'm just like, okay, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for saving me from myself.
Yeah, it's like a life raft that you never asked for.
It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
Welcome back to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show here on BSN. Eric Balkman from the FFPC, HSFF Hour, RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, along with Andrew Cooper at Coop A Fiasco on X, as it were. Cooper hanging out with us tonight. Coop, I meant to ask you this at the top of the show. So you and Britt and Kevin drafted a FFPC Pros versus Joe's draft. I think it was probably about 2.5 weeks ago now. But this was like right when you were becoming a dad. Did you have any kind of input on that at all?
I missed that one. I actually haven't even seen that. I gotta check out what that team looks like because I was supposed to be part of that one. Yeah. So I was in the hospital for that. I did call in one time from the hospital. They were talking to Pat Fitzmaurice about tight ends, and I was like, no way I missed this whole show. So I did call in for about 5 minutes on that one, but no, I missed that one. So hopefully they told me that if they win the big bucks, they'll
there you go.
They'll sneak me something.
Well, here's the great thing about that is if you guys end up winning your league, 12-team league, I mean the overall champ title is cool, but you don't really get anything for it. The big thing is winning your league, and if you win your league, boom, free entry into the FFPC main event next year, and then you can draft that team with them, and then if you guys win that league, you're $1 million.
Yeah, right.
I
need to make sure.
Let you guys split up the cash however you want to do it.
That's the one I got to be in. That's the one with the big bucks on it.
That's right. Yeah. Well, you know how to punch your ticket for sure. And if I remember correctly, because we covered those live and we've been re-airing them here on the Better Sports Network too. If I remember correctly, we had a lot of good things to say about that team too. Actually, Kevin was a guest on the show and we talked with him about it. And he sold us on the team. So for sure, yeah. I think it's a good one.
Kevin Britt are incredibly sharp. I mean, Britt, I was at the Fantasy Football Expo and I covered the Queen's Classic, taking videos and stuff for that. And I was just so impressed across the board. Not only impressed, but I was a little scared. Like that room, man, they were ruthless and they busted out every strategy in the book. There was a 0 RB team. There was a team that waited forever on QB and tight end. They were using the stacks. They were doing everything. It was just really, really impressive to watch. And as I've actually said on these airwaves, I just wish that every like Twitter troll out there that's like, oh, you know, she's a girl, blah, blah, blah. I wish they could be in a league like that and just get their faces ripped right off.
Oh yeah. I've seen it. happen.
That's what I'm saying. They don't know what it's like to play with professionals, right? It's like, it is serious stuff, man.
Let's get into some more serious stuff here. Jonathan Taylor has left Colts training camp for a personal reason. The Colts have excused his absence. Now, this was right after he returned to the team to rehab that ankle that was giving him so many problems last year. If we kind of read between the lines here, I don't think there's anything good with this Jonathan Taylor situation in Indianapolis. Now, Coop, he has fallen in drafts, which is good if you want to be a buyer on Jonathan Taylor. He hasn't fallen to the point where I'm in on him yet. He has an ADP of the 212, which is actually a little bit higher than it was about 4 or 5 days ago. Running back 8. I'm going to find somewhere else to pivot there at that 2-3 turn. Not comfortable investing in him. And if you don't like Jonathan Taylor, what running back should you be investing in Indianapolis later on?
Howard Bender actually had an interesting narrative on this where he said that Chris Ballard, if this is the case, what Howard was kind of insinuating, it's kind of funny where Taylor was saying, I want a contract, but then he was saying, I'm hurt and I'm not playing. And then this news from Chris Ballard, he turns around and says, oh, well, we'd love to pay you, but you're not healthy. We got to get you healthy before we pay you. And then it's back in Taylor. So Taylor's not going to turn around and say, oh, well, I'm healthy. I just don't want to be there. So now it's a personal matter. And he's healthy enough to be paid, but he's just not there. You know, so it seems like they're using the media to posture, which is never a good thing. No. The real concern is whether, like, we have to ask ourselves, do we think he'll pull a Le'Veon Bell, or the more apt one might be a Melvin Gordon? And with Melvin Gordon, I think it was 2019 when he came back, Austin Eckler had already kind of peeled away some of that good chunk of that job. I don't think anybody's good enough to peel the job away from Jonathan Taylor, but I was already a little worried about the mobile QB not dumping it down a ton. So I've moved him down a little bit. I've moved him down probably towards the end of the second round, beginning of the third round. I just have a hard time. If I'm picking on that 2-3 swing, I have a hard time letting him go. You know, he's just too good when he plays.
He's going ahead of guys. Whoops. No, I got my ADP messed up. I'm glad you brought that point up about Richardson being the mobile quarterback, and we don't always see very good running back performances with teams with mobile quarterbacks. Jonathan Taylor right now is going ahead of running backs like Jahmyr Gibbs, Ramondre Stevenson, Jacobs, Harris, and Mixon. All those guys are going behind Jonathan Taylor. He's fallen behind Barkley, Pollard, and Derrick Henry. That's where we're at on Jonathan Taylor.
And it's crazy where it's like each one of those guys has issues of their own. Jahmyr Gibbs has a David Montgomery issue. Ramondre Stevenson now has a Zeke issue. Joe Mixon has cleared one of two apparent hurdles in the court. But I mean, if Mixon is a full go, I kind of like Mixon. Man, I might like Mixon best out of that group.
Elite offense. You got to love the offense.
Najee Harris. I do like Najee Harris. And there's a lot of Jaylen Warren's team. But one thing I sat down and I said, okay, let's simulate the 2-minute drill, right? So I pulled up every team 3 minutes on the clock, because the reality of the 2-minute drill is it includes the minute leading up to the 2-minute warning, right? Like they use that as an extra timeout. So the 2-minute drill is the term, but it's kind of really the time leading up to that as well. So I included that, and I looked at second quarter, fourth quarter, overtime, either tied or down 2 scores. So I'm like, okay, do or die situations. Najee Harris in those situations got every single running back target, every single carry. So, and that's how it works with the 2-minute drill. You can't substitute guys in and out. You have to know the whole playbook. You have to know all the audibles. You have to know the blocking schemes. So even though Warren will mix in, I'm still confident that Najee Harris plays the quote unquote high leverage plays, goal line and 2-minute drill. So honestly, I'm still in on Najee in that group too. But yeah, Taylor, you have to get into that realm of where everybody has warts, and then you just say, well, you know what? Do I want to bet on David Montgomery getting hurt, or do I want to bet on Jonathan Taylor just playing?
Right, and at that point too, you weigh upside a lot more when it comes to the running backs with warts, as you pointed out, right. And the upside clearly would dictate like, oh, Jonathan Taylor led the league in rushing a couple of years ago. Still got a pretty good offensive line there, so there is something to be said.
The other situation is if I draft, and I've come because you and me, we're drafting all the time. The teams where I have Christian McCaffrey, I can't help but also take Jonathan Taylor and just sit back and say to myself, I just got the number 1 and number 2 pick from last year. So sometimes when I'm sitting there, I'm like, I can't pass up on this narrative that maybe I just rug pulled everybody.
Running back report continues here on the HSFF show. Rich Simony from ESPN says that Breece Hall is still dealing with occasional knee soreness. Coop, is this a red flag for you with Breece Hall? Because he's in a bit of a free fall as well. Since the Dalvin Cook signing, Breece Hall slipped to the 4.11, running back 16 right now. He might not make it through the weekend in the 4th round. He might slip to being a 5th round pick. And you say, okay, well, this is a guy that if he wouldn't have torn up his knee, he'd be the 101 this year. Well, a lot of stuff has changed since then. He did tear up his knee. They do have Dalvin Cook, and now you're looking at Breece Hall in the 5th round.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that I'm on these networks talking football every day, thinking about football. It's my favorite thing to do. So it's rare that there's a situation where I just say, I don't even want to think about it. I don't want to talk. Like, this whole thing is such a mess now with Dalvin there. And especially it's going to be even worse mess as these ADPs smooth out. And Dalvin's going to be right next to Breece. They're going to be going right next to each other, I believe, when all is said and done. And you're going to have to decide. And I don't even want to make that decision. Yeah. I really don't. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is if and when that does happen, I'll wait and maybe take the one who slides. But I don't want to be the one to take one when they're both on the board. Now, here's what I'm going to do. Eric, is I'm going to come on your show and I'm going to pass that question back to you right now. So let's say everyone in your league is thinking the same way. Right. Everyone's thinking the same way. We play with sharp gamers and they're all thinking I'm not taking one until someone takes the other. And you get to the point where you're like, okay, I got to make a call here. Do you like Dalvin or do you like Breece?
All right. So number one, I will give you, I promise you, I'm going to give you a real answer here.
I was saying you can't throw it back to me. That's also part of the question.
I'm going to give you a real answer. No. I'm not going to weasel out. So I've always liked the idea of waiting to draft the second guy, or in some cases the third guy, right? Because sometimes we talk about a 3-headed thing and a 3-headed backfield monster, and then you just take the third guy who sometimes the Eagles, quite frankly, that's what we're seeing right now.
Oh, I love that. That is the trick. The ambiguous backfield, take the cheapest option. So that of course. And so when you look at Hall versus Cook right now, I'm always, and maybe this is my dynasty mind poisoning my redraft mind, but I've had a lot of high stakes players tell me, you always want to get the ascending assets. To me,
Breece Hall is still an ascending asset, and Dalvin Cook not necessarily an ascending asset. In fact, we've probably seen his best football, regardless of what he does on the Jets this year. So for me, if the cost is roughly the same, even if Hall is a little bit more expensive, I would probably lean towards Hall. I understand that he did tear his ACL last year in the first year coming off the torn ACL. It hasn't exactly been a great modicum of success for a lot of running backs coming off that injury. But for me, I'm going to bet on the talent. I'm going to go with the talent here. And to me, at this point, it's a young man's game is the NFL, especially at the running back position. I would lean towards more shares of Hall than more shares of Cook.
Yeah. And especially in these big tournaments where, let's be honest, where you really turn money into big money is down the stretch. Mm-hmm. And that's where Hall is going to be back and he's going to be ready to rock and roll. And I guess the other thing that people aren't talking about enough is that Breece Hall is cleared and he has a knee soreness. Dalvin's not even cleared yet. And he's hurt his shoulder. This guy either missed time or had surgery in the offseason for a shoulder in 2014, 2016, 2019, 2021, and now 2022 again. So this guy with the shoulder, man, feels like a bit of a ticking time bomb. You know,
I just not that I want to, I'm obviously a Packers fan, as you can tell by my hat tonight, right. But my thing for Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay versus Aaron Rodgers in New York, this is such an Aaron Rodgers move to sign Cook, because if the Packers had this running back stable of Breece Hall, who quite frankly, they never would have drafted as high as the Jets drafted him. But let's just say the Packers, Brian Gutekunst in the front office for the Packers are running the Jets team. They're going to look at this situation and say, we got Hall. He's coming off this ACL, but we like him. We drafted Michael Carter, or we have Michael Carter already on the team. We drafted Izzy Abanikanda this year. We still have Bam Knight. We're going to be good with those running back positions. We're going to allocate our resources elsewhere. Whereas Aaron Rodgers comes to New York, and I have no doubt, nothing to back this up, mind you, no evidence. I have no doubt that he restructures his deal with prodding Joe Douglas, saying, listen, if I'm going to do this, I want to make sure that we're getting players in here. And this Dalvin Cook signing was as much as an Aaron Rodgers signing than it was a Joe Douglas signing. And now you enter Dalvin Cook into the fray to go along with Carter and Knight and Abanikanda and Hall. Like, to me, it's overkill at the position, but I think this is a move to appease Aaron Rodgers. And for fantasy, I think I'd rather lean towards Hall than the Rodgers guy, which is Dalvin Cook.
He's definitely like the angsty teenager who's lashing out the first time they get away from home, because correct me if I'm wrong, your Packers are like the number one homegrown team. Like, you guys rarely ever sign free agents. It's all homegrown. I remember one year I saw something that said like there were two guys that weren't drafted by the team that were starters, and one of them was that fullback that everyone loved to chant his name. I forget it now, but
how many years ago was this?
This was like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It was
4 or 5 years ago. I'm trying to think who that was. The fullback it was.
Everyone, I just remember the crowd, just like every other fullback, every time they get the ball.
Back in the day, John Kuhn was huge.
That's it, John Kuhn.
Kuhn.
Yeah, so it was during that period where I was like, everybody was drafted by the team.
And Kuhn actually went to a couple Pro Bowls. In fact, I think he went to another Pro Bowl when the Packers let him loose, or they didn't re-sign him, and he went to the Saints, and he went to a Pro Bowl or he went to a Pro Bowl as a Saint as well. So I think that, I don't know if they're number one, but I know they're right up there. Draft and develop has always been a big part of the philosophy ever since Ron Wolf took over as the GM back in the early 90s.
I would be shocked.
Ted Thompson really continued that as well.
I'd be shocked if they're not number one. I would be shocked if they're
not. I mean, and people get frustrated, but like, I don't want to turn this into a sports talk thing, but like, winning the offseason and winning the Super Bowl are two separate things. Right. Packers haven't won either one in quite some time. But like, I understand, like, people say, well, why didn't Green Bay go all in? We got to remember too, they kind of did go all in the last couple of years of Aaron Rodgers, where they were trying to keep him on board, kicking the can down the road on all these contracts, trying to keep guys like Bakhtiari and Jair Alexander and Kenny Clark and all these guys who are right up at the top of their positions payroll, league wide, to try to keep the band together. And then, Rodgers wanted to bring back Mercedes Lewis and Randall Cobb, and it didn't really work out. And such is life. He's on to New York. Green Bay's on to Jordan Love and all the young guys they got there. We are way up against it here. What do I want to do here, Coop? Let's talk about the Falcons real quick. Josh Kendall, who covers the Atlanta Falcons for The Athletic, says, He thinks Tyler Algier is going to see 170 touches in 2023. I think he also said Bijan Robinson about 300 touches in 2023. I didn't see what he said for Cordarrelle Patterson, but we've broken our necks talking about Bijan Robinson and what he can be as a stud fantasy footballer his rookie year, which usually happens when running backs have the kind of draft capital that he has. But I look at Tyler Algier sort of as a forgotten man. He's going in the 11th round as running back 46. He rushed for 1,000 yards last year. If anything were to happen to Robinson, you got to like what you have in Algier, right?
Well, I mean, that changed. Like, so if that report is true, and again, the Athletic, they do a great job. So a lot of times when it comes from a source like that, I don't necessarily take it as fact, but I mean, it's definitely interesting. It changes him from a 170 touches, changes him from a handcuff to a handcuff plus. Mm-hmm. Because you look at a guy like Jerick McKinnon last year, I think he was 70 targets, 70 rushes or so. And I think he only had like 50 something receptions. So that's what 120 touches look like. Now, Algier maybe not going to get a ton of receptions, but we're talking that's 10 touches a game. That's plenty, right? That's plenty to fill into a flex at times, fill into an RB2 spot at times when you need it. And if something happens to the starter, now you have a monster. So definitely makes him a more viable pick. And when you look at that same article, you said Bijan 300 touches. It doesn't mean you don't draft Bijan either. What it means is you definitely don't draft Mac Hollins. Like, you can't touch anybody that's outside. Maybe you don't touch London or Pitts, but I mean, if you're giving those guys, combining those guys for what, like almost 500 touches, he must have Mac Hollins at like 10.
Just getting this in right now from let's see who tweeted this out. Chris Emma, who I believe covers the Bears. I can't remember which publication. 670 to score. Said that Matt Eberflus just announced Justin Fields and select starters are not going to be playing this week. Probably want to go off on a high note after what they did this previous week in the preseason. DJ Moore takes his first touch as a Chicago Bear to the house. Justin Fields looked really good in limited action as well. We kind of talked a little bit about the Bears and why you're off them, but it's still exciting to see. The last thing I want to bring up, and probably I'm burying the lead of the running back report here, but Javonte Williams, Coop. I continue to say that this guy is being underdrafted. I'm shocked to see high-stakes drafters who are always looking for every little edge possible, that this guy was like a mid to late 7th-round pick a month or so ago, and then it was announced that he was going to be practicing as normal at the start of training camp, and he was going to be playing in the preseason this year. Sean Payton just says today he's going to get 10 to 12 touches. I think it was 10, or maybe it was 10 to 12 snaps. Could be 10 to 12 snaps, actually, in their preseason game this week. And yet he is barely moved a round and a half. He's basically an early to mid 6th-round pick. Javonte Williams going behind Madison, Kenneth Walker, Hall, Jones, ETN. He is going ahead of guys like Pierce, Cook, Rashad White, Kamara in that area. But I'm still surprised to see him going as an early to mid 6th-round pick. Should he be going higher right now?
I'll tell you, this is a guy that had the yellow tape on him, and now it's off. Because earlier this year, and it's crazy how the tables turned, we had all the reason in the world to believe that Breece Hall would be back first and Javonte Williams would come on slower. And Javonte Williams was the risk of them signing somebody, but turns out it went the other way. These knee injuries, we have to remember, we're talking about people here. You can't just go and say LCL plus ACL equals PCL equals, you know what I mean? Like, de facto, this guy will heal slower. People heal at different speeds. I mean, Adrian Peterson's basically Wolverine, right? Like, certain guys come back multiple times. I mean, Thomas Davis, he was like, how many times did he tear his Achilles? And he just kept coming back, having 100+ tackles every single year, right? So, like, some guys come back, some guys don't. This week, I'll tell you what, if we go through this week and he looks good, we're in. It's either that Javonte Williams is fully healthy or Sean Payton's an asshole. That's the only, right? Those are the only two possibilities here. And if Javonte Williams is good, then everybody that's been drafting him already at ADP is looking pretty, right?
Yeah.
It could be a situation where when you look at some of the guys that won the big leagues last year, there were teams, the ones that draft all summer. I know Pat Carrain, who won one of the other high stakes tournaments, he drafted his team in early August, and it just so happened he caught the good news and didn't get hit by any of the bad news. So there could be a situation where some team that has already drafted potentially. I mean, if you timed it right, you could be good. But historically speaking, the numbers suggest the best time to draft these high stakes leagues is now through the start, right?
And that's where you need to be loading up right now.
Right.
Obviously, now's the time.
Even if you drafted already, you like
if you drafted already, the ADPs change. Obviously,
they change. So you got to get back in at least one more time. But I actually wait. Now is when I'm going to draft my most important hometown leagues and my big leagues. Now is when I'm really jumping in.
We are going to be jumping into hour number 2. We've actually already jumped into hour number 2. When we come back, we're going to find out where Coop stands on guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders, and much more. It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Andrew Cooper from Fantasy Alarm. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Don't go anywhere. We're going to talk more fantasy football, high stakes topics right after this.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show with Eric Balkman.
Better Sports Network. Collectible moments.
Everybody up here at U.S. Cellular. Sox 5 runs, 6 hits. The 2-1 to Bartlett. Swing shot to short. Ramirez has it, throws. Burley picks the perfect game. His second no-hitter. People going crazy here at U.S. Cellular. He's mobbed by his teammates. A perfecto.
Now there's a steal by Bird. Underneath the DJ, lays it in. Right up, 1 second left. What a play by Bird. Bird stole the impounding pass. Laid it up to DJ. DJ laid it up and in. And Boston has a 1-point lead with 1 second left.
Out of the I formation on first down. Peterson to carry, looking for running room on the right side, has it to the 25, across the 30, across the 35, and out of bounds at the 40-yard line. Adrian Peterson has just gone over 2,000 yards for the season, the 7th man in NFL history to cross the 2,000-yard mark.
Well, a thundering ovation for number 66, Mario Lemieux.
Just the emotion I'm sure Mario is feeling in this place. You don't appreciate something until it's gone, and it's so great to have Mario back.
Yager turns around. Over to Lemieux. Mario Lemieux, his first goal in his comeback here tonight at the Mellon Arena. And the Penguins lead 3-0, and he is smiling like a butcher's dog. Mario Lemieux.
Oh, the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone. The Bears have scored, but the Bands are out on the field.
Pearson moves in front of the STP Dodge. Petty comes back to the inside. They almost touch as they move down low in the banking. They're going to be side by side as they exit the bank and head for the finish line.
Richard Petty goes back in front. They both spin. They're in the wall. Petty is sliding, slamming into the wall. He's coming down toward the finish line. Will he make it? Pearson is still running. The winner is car number 21. An amazing finish. Richard Petty's car demolished in the front end, as well as car number 21. An unbelievable finish, a terrible crash. David Pearson has won the Daytona 500. Leitner catches, comes down, dribbles, shoots, scores! Christian Leitner has hit the bucket at the buzzer! Pitched by Downing, swinging, there's a drive into left center field. That ball is going to be out of here. It's gone. It's 7-15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
The most valuable player is Magic Johnson. 42 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists. He starts at center, plays forward and guard, and leads the Los Angeles Lakers to a world championship 123-107 over Philadelphia.
Whether you collect sports memorabilia, fantasy championships, or winning bet slips, talk about it on Better Sports Network. High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
13 minutes past the top of the hour here on BSN. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. He is Andrew Cooper at Coop A Fiasco on X/Twitter from Fantasy Alarm. Hey, remember, the FFPC is the home of season-long fantasy football. 2 separate $1 million grand prize contests, FFPC Main Event, Fantasy Pros Championship, Best Ball Leagues, Dynasty Leagues, Terminator Drafts, which actually are going on right now, the live ones. Those are a lot of fun. 26 rounds. You get to drop a player off your roster each week until the final week of the season. It used to be, Coop, that you would have a full lineup, you know, quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, 2 flexes, tight end, kicker, defense. It used to be like that. And then we get the last few years, people were sending emails like, can I actually drop like somebody else? Like, can I drop a kicker? Can I drop a defense? And then just go naked in that final week. I don't think it's ever worked out, or maybe it has. I don't know, but that's always fun with the Terminator. Weekly challenge and more. Go ahead, Coop.
Guys, and that's ballsy dropping.
It is ballsy. It is
people
ballsy.
They always come to me and they're like, I'm just going no tight end. And this is a Howard Bender classic philosophy going, he said it for years and years. And I've seen too much of that mistake. Never take a zero on purpose. Never take a zero.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. By the way, you can always use promo code ALARM at myffpc.com for our exclusive offer. Get $25 off your first FFPC entry of $35 more. Just go to myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Use promo code ALARM. That's ALARM. Where do you stand on Jahmyr Gibbs, Andrew Cooper? We talked about this a little bit earlier, but when we bring in ADP into this, which I think we have to talk about it, Jahmyr Gibbs, running back 9 at the 304, ahead of Stevenson, ahead of Jacobs, ahead of Harris, ahead of Mixon. Where do you stand on Jahmyr Gibbs this year, man?
And that's the whole thing. You threw the ADP in there because, if we were just picking guys we like and guys we don't like, there'd be 2 gigantic buckets, right? Mm-hmm. But you got to keep, it's like running a race of hurdles, right? The first hurdle is whether we even like them or not. And half the guys just get pancaked on that first hurdle, right? Then you got to get past ADP, right? Like, are they going at a place we like? And then you got to make it through the preseason without getting hurt. And then at the end of that, you have a pool of players that you're willing to pick from, right? So it's not just do we like him, do we not? I like Jahmyr Gibbs, but I don't like when he goes as the RB12 in a lot of these. I mean, where's he going in FFPC? I know you've been looking at it right there.
Running back 9 right now is where Gibbs is going. It's very, very high, very high for him.
In theory, right? And this is a big reason why I like Dalton Kincaid, and I know you didn't have him on the list later, is that you look at these teams, Bills, Lions, their win now. These players that take in the first round, they are supposed to be impact players right now. We like that for Gibbs. We like the fact that he catches passes, but I just can't get beyond the fact that they win. And people keep coming to me and say, oh, well, they don't want to waste that first round pick, as if they want to waste all the money they gave David Montgomery. Like, the GM doesn't want to waste anything. The reality is that if you have David Montgomery, who has 25 pounds on Jahmyr Gibbs, he's going to have a role, and his role is probably going to be specific. A lot of times, it doesn't have to be as hard as we make it. What you're picturing the roles to be is probably what they're going to be. If there's a pass interference in the end zone and they get to send anybody down there to punch it in, and Jared Goff doesn't do that himself, it's going to be David Montgomery. And Jamal Williams did that role for them last year, and they could have had Jamal Williams on a cheap deal to do the same thing. And they said, no, we're going to pay extra for somebody that does the Jamal Williams job better than Jamal Williams, right? And we're going to trade up for somebody that does the DeAndre Swift job better than DeAndre Swift. Now, there's a world where we get a Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara situation where Alvin Kamara's rookie year, Kamara was like RB3, and and Mark Ingram was RB7, and that was awesome. And Adrian Peterson got jettisoned into the sun, which really helped that out. But betting on that is a much easier bet when you're paying rookie year Alvin Kamara prices, which was not RB9. That's the problem is I need to thread a crazy needle to get to a top 5 RB. When I'm drafting RB9, I'm already thinking I'm drafting a guy that is going to be top 5, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the problem with Gibbs for me. I'm willing to let somebody else take him because of that. I wish everybody wasn't so sharp. And the thing is, on FFPC, the sharpest gamers that are shooting for the moon, he goes 9. On other sites, you can still get him like 12, 13, 14. And when you're playing with people like that, maybe in your hometown league, people don't really understand how talented this guy is, and you get him at like 14 or 15. I love that. Yeah. I can't pay all the way up to have him be the RB1 on my team when there's a real possibility he's not even the best RB on his own team.
And I think that's, it's because it's a national tournament, right? It's because the Fantasy Pros Championship, the main event, you can't just beat 11 teams. You got to beat, thousands of teams.
You have to catch lightning in a bottle.
And Gibbs is an example of trying to catch lightning in a bottle. Awesome if it works, but very hard to do.
And the thing is, if it doesn't work in those big tournaments, it's almost like, who cares? Everybody loses anyway, except for, you know what I mean? Like right. Yeah. In my hometown league, it's a $300 buy-in. And if you come in third, you're getting a good chunk of change, right? Like it's a little different. Weekly payout leagues, there's different formats where you want to either go crazy or not. And Gibbs, hey, tell people I like the player, so go crazy if you want. But me, I play a little more conservative with those picks.
Joe Mixon, we talked about him earlier in the show. He's found not guilty of aggravated menacing charges, which I didn't even know aggravated menacing was a thing. I had no idea that's what it was called. This is when he was pointing a gun at a woman following a traffic incident. This was not the issue that was going on his property. That was a separate thing. This was from February. Now, Mixon is in the clear, but we'll find out he's technically still could be suspended. This of the March 6th shooting that he's still facing a civil suit over, that's what occurred on his property. Mixon is a guy that has dropped precipitously, and a guy that was going much higher in March and April than he is right now. He's fallen now to the 402, still ahead of Etienne, Jones, and Hall, but now behind Stevenson, Jacobs, and Harris. Joe Mixon at running back 13, Coop. What do you make of the latest news we got on him from a legal standpoint as far as his ADP goes? And yes, it's 2023. We have to use that all in one sentence. Legalese and fantasy football ADP.
It's a lot, dude.
It's crazy.
It's a lot, man. It used to be a lot easier early 2000s. There were 32 starting running backs, and you just picked the ones on the good teams, and that was life. Also, they gotta start. There's a lot of terms out there in the world that don't match up with the severity, right? Like, aggravated menacing. The definition kind of is just kind of threatening, and like manslaughter sounds pretty bad too. Whereas like turf toe doesn't sound bad at all, but it actually is real bad. Like, like we got to start matching up the words with the severities here.
Mm-hmm.
But Joe Mixon, for me, when I look at this narrative and the timeline, I'm in. And the thing that and I'm a metrics guy myself. I love them. I look at them all the time, but there's a certain world where the yards per carry and the yards after contact and the expected yards per carry that are machine learning. They run the situation a million times and say what the average running back would do, and it suggests that he's below average. That all goes out the window when he's the starting running back for the Cincinnati Bengals, and there's no Gio Bernard and there's no Samaje Perine. And last year he was on pace for like 90 targets. He had 71, which was like top 5-6 already, and that was missing 3 games. Mm-hmm. So, and the other funny thing about this narrative is, you notice that morning, very early in the morning, they had the court case, and we didn't get the outcome right away, but they had the case where everyone argued everything and it was open and the information was out. And then that afternoon, Dalvin Cook signed with the Jets and Ramondre Stevenson signed with the Patriots. Interesting timing on that one, where it seems like everybody said, "Hey, guess this is a big nothing. Bengals are off the table." So for me, Joe Mixon, I'm absolutely willing. As I said earlier, I'm willing to take him ahead of. I have trouble taking even as a Patriots fan and knowing what Ramondre Stevenson's capable of. I think I'd rather just have Joe Mixon as the guy for the Bengals. So I honestly, and I personally might take him ahead of Gibbs. I know maybe I'm catching a falling knife here, as you talked about. We want ascending guys, but it's just that offense is so good to have the guy that we saw get a lot of targets last year. It almost feels too good to be true. Maybe it is, but I'm willing to go there.
I want to pivot just a little bit because you reminded me of something. Obviously, your Patriots and my Packers are going against each other, not only at preseason on Saturday night in Lambeau Field, but they've been doing joint practices both today and yesterday. Packers really did well yesterday at practice. Patriots obviously won the day today, crushing the Packers in practice. I'm kind of curious. I heard a reporter who covers, maybe not a reporter, but a local Boston sports talk radio personality, who is actually from Wisconsin, and she moved out and now is on the Boston airwaves out there. And I was listening to her talk about the Patriots offense, and she's like, I don't want to say the term 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but there's not a lot of legitimate playmakers on this offense. Knowing that, well, number one, are you buying into that? Number two, as a result, are you kind of fading just the Patriots offense in general this year because you're kind of looking at it like, well, who are the upside, who are the spike week guys here? I'm not really sure I'm seeing any. Your thoughts, and just give us the lay of the land on the Patriots offense.
Yeah. So actually, when you look at what they've done, it seems almost too obvious that the last time Bill O'Brien called plays for this team, 2011, they're basically just recreating that offense with worse pieces. The one piece that's better right now is the running back. The running backs are better now than they were then, but they were pretty decent then. And the offensive line, I can never say the offensive line is better now because they had Dante Scarnecchia then, and he's like a legendary O-line coach, and he's not around. So it's not even just about the personnel, but the rest of it, it's kind of matching personnel except worse. So Mac Jones is going to try and beat Tom Brady, which is an impossible task. Hunter Henry as the inline tight end is in the Rob Gronkowski role, and Rob Gronkowski finished as tight end 1 that year. Aaron Hernandez will be was the move tight end, and that's Mike Gesicki, and he finished as tight end 3 that year. And all that happened while Wes Welker got 173 targets in a 16-season game, and that's what Juju's going to try and do, right? So it seems pretty clear that that's the way they're setting it up. But again, this isn't 2011. Tom Brady's not walking through that door, and every one of those pieces is probably a worse football player than what they had at the time. So I know what they're trying to do, and that makes me like Juju, right, for just target purposes. He doesn't need to be Wes Welker. He doesn't need to be Julian Edelman. All he needs to be is Jacoby Myers, and now he's worth his ADP, that like wide receiver 40 or so, right? And then Mike Gesicki, just everything about the fact that he has a separated shoulder right now means you can't really do anything about it, but he's going like tight end 20, and I'm willing to draft any tight end that is lining up at wide receiver at that range, right? So I'm interested there, but if Gesicki's out, now Hunter Henry's on the team. I can't go with Devontae Parker. Tyquan Thornton is more of a field stretcher, and Kendrick Bourne, they're just going to rotate too much. So if I'm going to go with anyone, I'm going to go with Juju, to be honest right now.
And Coop, actually, in the Fantasy Pros Championship right now, Juju Smith-Schuster, wide receiver 51 at the 10:08, and Mike Gesicki, tight end premium, he's tight end 29 in the 17th round. So the couple of guys that you could buy late on there, that's really not going to hurt you if it doesn't work out. So interesting stuff.
Yeah, what I would do with Juju is that if you're going – oh, sorry, my computer forgot to froze for a sec there. If you're going –
story of my life.
It was my screensaver. I was like, oh, my God, no. But, we've been chatting without moving my mouse for too long. Yeah. So if I'm going with a zero RB build, I probably don't have room for Juju on that team because I'm so loaded with wide receivers. But if I end up taking a QB and a tight end and a couple RBs early, and I need to put together a starting lineup that is serviceable, Juju as your wide receiver 3 or even 2, like at least you know there's a floor there, and then you spend your entire bench on high risk, high reward guys. That's the world where I take a Juju. But like in this zero RB world, like, you know, what do you do? You don't want Jujus on the team. You don't want Tyler Boyd's on the team. But I think Juju, honestly, there's no substitution for targets, and I think that he could get peppered in that
role. Where do you stand on Miles Sanders, Coop? How much yellow tape is around him right now, knowing that he's fighting this groin injury? He's getting closer to practice. I don't know if he's going to play in any of the preseason games at all. But Chuba Hubbard being drafted behind him. In fact, if you look at how the Carolina Panthers backfield is being drafted right now in the FFPC, you're looking at Sanders as running back 25 at the 6'11", Chuba Hubbard 1309 at the running back 54. And I think at the crux of this is Miles Sanders' groin and how this affects both of these players.
Yeah, well, the thing is with Chuba, how many times have we seen Chuba get a chance, man? Like CMC was hurt multiple years and he was out there, didn't look good. CMC got traded, and Donta Foreman came off the street and took that starting job and ran for 900 yards in that offense. So it wasn't even it's not like you can blame the offense. Donta Foreman ran for 914 yards, right? And Chuba was just kind of hanging out. So I'm not worried about Chuba. I'm worried about the groin. That's the one thing. But I'll tell you what, this guy, Miles Sanders, if he's healthy, this has been a flag plant for me because, and you understand that with the mobile QBs, we kind of hit on it earlier. Mobile QBs are great for yards per carry, right? That's why this guy's a 5-yard career yards per carry, but they don't dump it down. And they vulture the goal line touchdowns. And the Eagles were dead last in passes to the running back. And I actually pulled it up. Under Doug Peterson 2019, Boston Scott and Miles Sanders combined for 39 screen passes, just the two of them. Last year, the two of those players combined for more snaps played. Guess how many screens they combined for?
Oh, I have no idea. I wouldn't even know where to go because you're leading me in a direction here. I don't know.
I'm leading you less than 39, right? But
yeah,
6.
That's it?
That's it, dude.
Oh
and so you know what it is?
I was going to say like 20 or something like that.
That's right. 20 would have been half.
Cow.
Well, 20 would have fit the narrative of saying,
Right.
okay, half, right? Total, including the other guys, including Kenneth Gainwell and the everyone floating around, it was 9. And I was like, so they can't just not be calling screens. Dallas Goedert, even missing games, led all tight ends with screens. He had 19. They like the wide receiver tight end screens more than they do the running back screens. Sirianni just runs it that way. So I see Miles Sanders come over, and there's a video on my timeline of Scott Fitterer going to Miles Sanders and saying, remember when you caught 50 balls? That was fun. That's why we brought you here. So Miles Sanders, for me, if he's healthy, it's wheels up. It's a better situation for upside. But obviously the floor is a guy with a hurt groin playing with a rookie QB and a bunch of misfit toy wide receivers, and it's just a nightmare. So, but at his ADP, I'm in. So Miles Sanders, and there's an article I wrote. If you go over fantasyalarm.com, Andrew Cooper, Miles Sanders, Google Miles Sanders, Andrew Cooper, or Miles Sanders Fantasy Alarm. There's a full article with a full breakdown on why I like this player. And since I wrote that, the only thing that's changed is this groin injury. Everything else is exactly the same. Yeah. So if he's healthy, he's fully good to go, then we're going for it. We're in.
FantasyAlarm.com is where to check that out. The Miles Sanders piece by one Andrew Cooper. Speaking of Cooper, what about Kupp, Cooper, who is going in the first round of the FFPC Fantasy Pros Championship and the main event? You're looking at Cooper Kupp now, guy who was going at like the 3 or 4, not the 3, but definitely the 4 earlier in drafting season. Now he has fallen to the 107. Obviously, the injury has something to do with that. How do you handle Cooper Kupp right now, Coop?
God, this one's so tough for me. I actually want to hear what you think on this, because my thoughts are he's going to make somebody look stupid either way, right? Because if you have to spend a first round pick on him. That's the part that's so hard. Is like, this isn't Michael Thomas where you look and say, okay, this guy had one of the greatest seasons of all time, but he's been hurt, and you get a chance of the upside for cheap. With Cooper Kupp, you got to pay for it, right? So you either paying that and then he's hurt, or Matthew Stafford's hurt, or the team stinks and it hurts, or you're not paying it and then someone else in your league gets Cooper Kupp and he's Cooper Kupp, and now you feel like an idiot for taking somebody else. So this guy, somebody's going to get their pants pulled down on this one. Would you rather avoid him and be on that side, or are you just saying, hey, this is Cooper Kupp, this is Antonio Brown, and you just take Antonio Brown and hope that, because that's the thing with Antonio Brown, for 4 straight years he was amazing, and Cooper Kupp, even last year before he got hurt, he was amazing. He was awesome. Yeah. He was
on par. Last season was on par to do more than what he did, or on pace, I should say, to do more than what he did when he won Offensive Player of the Year.
He played 8 games and finished as a wide receiver too, like bonkers.
Yeah. To answer your question, I am more in the avoid situation, but I'm gonna couch it a little bit by saying this. So Cooper Kupp is a guy who obviously dealt with the injury last year. I don't think that we can just write that off because of his age. Like there is a possibility that something like this could happen again. He's also based on the success of Matthew Stafford, another guy who's been hurt quite a bit. I think that people say that, the Rams, they're so terrible this year. Well, their defense is really terrible, but I think that's actually a good thing for Cooper Kupp this year. So I think that works in his favor. I will say this. If Austin Eckler or Bijan Robinson are out there at the 107, I'm probably taking both those guys ahead of Kupp, because I believe in the offense for Eckler more, and I believe in the draft capital and the success that running backs with that draft capital have had their rookie years previously, and that's why I take Eckler or Robinson. I will say that if both those guys are gone, I'm still taking Kupp. I'm not going to take Kupp ahead of Tyreek Hill, but I take Kupp ahead of Diggs. I take him ahead of Lamb, and I take him ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think there are all things to like about those players, but I am a little bit concerned about the Buffalo offense, just the vibes I'm getting this year from Buffalo. And obviously, Diggs has been no stranger to not being happy in Buffalo. So I think I'm getting bad vibes there. CeeDee Lamb, we talked about this earlier. I think Dallas is going to really put a focus on running the ball. They have a healthy-ish Michael Gallup and Brandon Cooks this year. So that's why I like Kupp a little bit better for volume over Lamb. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown is fine. I just think the upside for Kupp is higher than St. Brown. I know there's people that disagree with me on that, and St. Brown has actually been climbing up draft boards, but the potential volume for Cooper Kupp still has me taking him over those other receivers. The only receivers I won't take over are the only receivers that I will take over Kupp are the obvious ones, and that's Jefferson, Chase, and Hill.
Yeah, so he's still I like to call it the swing test, and I mentioned it earlier, where if you're picking on the swing, you can't let him go by. And Jonathan Taylor was a swing test player on the other swing. I can't let him go, and Kupp is there for me too. But I think the real lesson here in listening to your breakdown there is everybody out there, if you have a chance to pick your draft spot, just pick 101. Just pick it one. Take Justin Jefferson. Save yourself from the mind pretzel that is right now picking at that goddamn swing, because some of those players are going to be amazing, right? But it's just like dodging bullets, man. Just pick at 101 and then at the next swing you can have those debates, but it feels better when it's not the first player you're taking, right?
The Seattle Seahawks this year have a very interesting offense. They invested 1 year after drafting Kenneth Walker in the second round. They draft Zach Charbonnet in the second round. They already had DK Metcalf. They already had Tyler Lockett. They go out and get Jackson Smith-Njigba in the first round, arguably the best receiver in this class. Where do you stand on Jackson Smith-Njigba for redraft purposes, Coop?
Yeah, I mean, like if he went like top 10 in the draft and then was like just the undisputed super high draft capital guy, then I would be pouring over him. But I just worry that he's going to start a little bit kind of the way Chris Godwin did, where Chris Godwin had good seasons early on, but it was still Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson when it went to 2 wide receiver sets. The third year, when Djax was gone, then it was wheels up. And I worry that it's still just going to be Evans and Lockett. And just this week, Evans and Lockett got the day off. JSN played as a rookie. And Nathan Janke of PFF pointed out that when they went to 12 personnel, which is a 2 tight end set, he came out. And the other 2 guys stayed in. And those 2 guys are probably understudies for Lockett and Evans. But it's more to me about the role. If the role exists where you just play slot and come out the way Tyler Boyd does, kind of caps your ceiling a little bit. So it is scary to me, but at the same time, I personally, with my philosophy, have missed out on guys because of these arguments. So this is where I need to check my own process myself and just let people know that this is the way I operate. I'm kind of ultra conservative with my early picks, and this guy could just be straight amazing. So keep that in mind. The one-handed catches you see in practice, that's not CGI. That's not those one-on-one drills. These guys they're trying their hardest. These are real cornerbacks, right? And so those plays are happening for real. So there's a chance that he's just awesome, and I'll admit that absolutely.
We have talked a lot about Jordan Addison and now Jackson Smith-Njigba tonight on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. You found out where Coop stands on this. Well, what about another opinion that you'd be interested in? Well, how about 2 opinions? Kevin Tompkins and Colby Conway from Fantasy Alarm had a player debate. Should you draft Jordan Addison or Jackson Smith-Njigba? Check that out at fantasyalarm.com, and you'll have a better feel on not only what Coop feels about that situation, but as well as what Tompkins and Conway are saying. fantasyalarm.com is where to check that out. Register for Dynasty startups too, by the way, at myffpc.com. They start at $100. They go all the way up to $5,000 for the Dynasty leagues. Dynasty has been a staple of the FFPC for more than a decade. More than 1,400 leagues have commenced. We're still running more than 1,400 leagues because not a single one has ever folded. So if you want Dynasty without the hassle, go to myffpc.com. Register today. Startups going off every single day here now until the start of the NFL season. I feel bad because I know a lot of people, you mentioned Jack Senzen and Ann Dunn hanging out with us tonight watching. They're like, when are we going to get into the tight end whisperer? When are we going to get into the tight ends? Well, don't have to wait much longer, do you, here on the BSN, because we are going to get into a couple of higher tight ends in Waller and Laporta. But as we always talk about every single year, there is always a tight end or maybe 2 tight ends that are not drafted very high, maybe outside the top 15, but end up returning top 10, sometimes even top 5 value. We're going to examine a couple of those candidates coming up next. He's Andrew Cooper from the Fantasy Alarm. I'm Eric Balkman from the Fantasy Football Players Championship. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Don't go anywhere. We roll on next. Breece Hall right now, and I've talked to plenty of high-stakes players. I'm sure you have too, Kev. Had Hall not torn his ACL last year, he might have been the 101 in drafts this year. That's how good he was looking last year, and obviously with the addition of Aaron Rodgers. At the 305, running back 11 behind Derrick Henry and Ramondre Stevenson, right ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs and Najee Harris. Your thoughts on him as a mid-third round pick? How have you been attacking him? Have you been getting him at that spot so far this year?
Yeah, if I start out with 2 wide receivers, Breece Hall is right at the top of the queue coming into the third. If I knew he'd be healthy for week 1, I was still a little.
Well, he'd be going higher than the mid third.
Right. He may go 101 or well, RB1 at least.
Yeah.
But I don't think we know that even if he's healthy in spring and the summer.
Mm-hmm.
I still like if I'm running a team, if I'm the coach, I'm bringing him back slow. Like he's on a pitch count. Like I want him for the end of the season because I got Aaron Rodgers for the playoffs, right? Like even if he's fully healthy, I would work him in slow. But that is actually what you want. Like he's still going to get the high value touches. So yeah, if we know he's healthy, he's a first rounder. So like if he's sitting there in the third, especially when I get 2 wide receivers to start, I'll take Hall all day.
Yeah, it almost makes me think that the uncertainty with Breece Hall has made him unfairly fall too far, right? Like because we're talking about the team here in June. They're still hoping that he's ready for week 1. This is not, oh, we'll see what happens. Oh, we're taking it day by day. Oh, we're liking how he's coming along. No, they still think by week 1. And the fact that we have that timeline, I think, maybe bumps him up, especially as the drafting season gets deeper and deeper here in July and August. Maybe we start seeing him go up the boards as well.
It's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
Final segment of the program tonight, 19 minutes until Garrett Price and those Dynasty nerds take over the airwaves here on the Better Sports Network. Until then, it is myself, Eric Balkman, and Andrew Cooper. Coop, a Fiasco on X. Follow him there from Fantasy Alarm, joining us tonight. And obviously, the biggest thing is tight ends with Coop, right? That is, we've gotten to the appetizers. We've gotten into the escargot. We've gotten into the beet salad, right? But now we are on to the tomahawk steak here. The tight end whisperer himself joining us tonight. So Coop, number one, how did you, I guess, where did your passion come from analyzing the tight end position where you've gotten to be so very, very talented at it?
So it's funny, to me, the tight end whisperer was always Howard Bender.
Right.
And he was the one that started calling me that. And now he's like, he kept being like, you're the tight end whisperer now. But to me, it's more of a brotherhood of tight end whisperer.
It's not an Obi-Wan, Luke Skywalker situation, right?
My feeling is this, and because on Twitter, people are like, oh, so-and-so is a tight end whisperer and so-and-so is. I think that whoever gives you your tight end advice and that you listen to and you trust, that could be your tight end whisperer. Dan Williams, people like Dan Williamson, people like David Gautieri, you know what I mean? If that's a tight end whisperer to you, that's fine. It's like the GOAT, I'm okay. If people want to have a different GOAT, that's fine, but there are people that trust me. And it's because at one point when I started with Fantasy Alarm, right, I wasn't the tight end guy. I wasn't anything. And Howard Bender was the tight end guy. So John Impemba, the editor, was handing out roles. And he's like, you cover running back this year. And I was like, okay. I got this side project I've been working on. That's this big spreadsheet with a lot of tight end stats, and everything was highlighted and color coded. And I was like, give this to Howard Bender, and he'll use it for his stuff. And then Howard called me on the phone. He's like, walk me through some of this. And I'm like, well, this is how we find breakouts in the past, and I've been using this for a while now, and I created this. And he goes, tell you what, you write the tight end articles. I'll write the running back articles. So I became that guy, and luckily, through those, what I was looking at are some small sample size metrics that people didn't care about as much as the time. Now that I've been talking about, not just me, there's people out there that plenty of them, but looking at what we do with like yards per route run with wide receivers and how with more snaps, now it becomes bigger, right? Well, what I was looking at is I was like, okay, you look at these tight ends, and the big one that kind of put me on the map was Mark Andrews. I looked at Andrews and a few other guys, and I was like, holy cow, this guy blocks on 0 pass plays. Every time he's out there to run a route, right? He's running high A-dot routes, like 12-yard routes. all the things that if you just add more snaps to it, create a profile of a guy that could be the next Travis Kelce. And, I looked at, and people weren't looking at who was staying into block, who wasn't, you know what I mean? So it's like that was the big one that put me there. And then since then, I've narrowed down the criteria that leads to breakouts. And it just so happened that the last, as you kind of alluded to, for 6 straight years, a tight end has come from outside the top 17 in ADP to finish top 5, right? We've had Mark Ingram, we've had Eric Ebron with 13 touchdowns from Andrew Luck. We had Darren Waller and Mark Andrews the same year. We had Logan Thomas, who was tight end like 35. We had Dalton Schultz, and then now Evan Ingram again. So we're finding them, not always necessarily drafting him, but that's where the yin and yang tight end strategy comes in. Short and sweet for anyone that doesn't know. If you don't get an elite guy, you draft one safe guy, pair him with one high risk, high reward guy, and you keep swapping them out. So the whole thing's it's evolving, and as long as people are listening, and as long as people at the end of the year are saying, "Hey, man, I used your advice and it worked," then I'm going to keep doing it. So that's where we're at. That's the story. And as quickly as we can, because I know I've already run my mouth so much we don't have a lot of time.
It's fine. Here's what I'm going to do, because I want to cover as much as we can. I want to skip Darren Waller because he's tight end 4 right now. He's going to be great this year as long as he stays healthy. Dan Dugan, who covers the Giants for The Athletic, said it'd be shocking if Waller does not lead them in targets. We can go past him. Let's talk about a couple of rookies here. In fact, let's talk about a trio of rookies. Let's do it this way.
Yeah. Sam
Laporta, Dalton Kincaid, Luke Musgrave. Your thoughts on these 3 guys, because I think they all have pros and cons here. And I didn't have Kincaid on there earlier, but let's talk about him now. Laporta, Kincaid, and Musgrave. Laporta and Kincaid, I should bring this up too. Laporta is going right now, tight end 14 at the 1102. Kincaid a little bit higher, tight end 11 at the 908. Luke Musgrave wasn't even drafted like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Now he's tight end 22 at the 1403. So they're being drafted in order: Kincaid, Laporta, Musgrave. Coop, I'm just that is the brain dump here. You take it whatever way you want to go with it on these 3 players.
Yeah. So people out there, there's an article pinned to my profile, "What makes an elite tight end?" And that breaks down the criteria. And you can just take, there's basically 8 things that you can put on a little cheat sheet, and that gives you all the answers. But the one biggest thing, we talked about it earlier, when you talk about how rare it is for 3 guys on one team to get 100 targets, every tight end that's finished top 5 in PPR going back to 2003 Randy McMichael. So how's that for sample size?
Randy McMichael, that is a blast of the
20-year sample size. Everyone has had one of 2 things. They've had either 90 plus targets or they've had double-digit touchdowns. And we know touchdowns aren't super sticky, but that's look at George Kittle last year, 11 touchdowns. He got there. In half PPR, there's only been one exception. Mark Andrews had 88 targets one year, and it was the COVID year. So I'm even willing to throw that out. In your mind, you got to be talking about how do we get to double-digit touchdowns or 90 targets. And I don't project anyone double-digit touchdowns, not even Travis Kelce. It's too fluky, right? So how do we get those targets, right? If you look at difference-making seasons, top 50 all-time tight end seasons, every single player in the top 50 was a top 2 target on their team, except one time it was Tony Gonzalez with Roddy White and Julio Jones. So, again, you could throw that one season out. We need top 2 targets. I look at these 3 guys, and why can't they be top targets on the team? Why can't Dalton Kincaid walk into that Cole Beasley role in the slot, where Beasley at 30 years old, 30, 31, 32, got back-to-back 100 target seasons. And Sam Laporta is the guy I alluded to, which seems like ages ago. In the first segment, I said there's a guy that you can throw on your bench and see how he does early in the season, and you either keep him or throw him away. That's Sam Laporta. We have Jameson Williams he cannot play for 6 weeks. So if Sam Laporta is doing it early, great. If he's not doing it, it's not going to get better when Jameson Williams gets back. So that's a bench spot where you throw him on the bench, see how it looks, dump him if you have to. But I love this guy because 23 broken tackles last year in college. I mean, insanity. A guy like Luke Schoonmaker broke 2 in his entire college career. Like this guy I'm calling him Sam Teleporter, because if you watch the tape, watch the one GIF from the bowl game where he breaks 6 tackles on the play. So this guy's electric. He's a lot of fun. He's already earned the starting job. And then Luke Musgrave, He's just the complete mystery box. The thing with him is I was out on him until I had on Brandon Huffman, who is, Huff, he's like a legendary college, high school to college scout. And he was like, this guy has it. And he named Bryce Young and Josh Downs as other guys that, like, I don't care how big they are, I don't care what they do. Like, these guys have that special something that makes you a competitor, a football player. So I'm interested there. And simply because if you were to put Luke Musgrave in a situation like the Bengals, where now we know for a fact he's behind T. Higgins and he's behind Jamar Chase, and Hayden Hurst got fewer targets per game than Joe Mixon, and he was also behind Tyler Boyd. If he's in that situation, I'm out. But in this situation, we don't know who Jordan Love likes. Why not? So all three of those guys, and usually I pour cold water on rookie tight ends. This year, I'm saying why not? So all three.
What about a guy that I've heard conflicting reports on coming out of Denver of how well he's doing? And I know they saw the Broncos also got Adam Troutman on the team as well. But Greg Dulcich was a guy that, tight end premium dynasty rookie drafts when he was a rookie. People were pretty excited to draft him. And then this year I heard some people are saying he looks lost. He doesn't know what's going on. Not having a good camp at all. And then I've heard other people say that it's been overblown and it's also training camp. We don't need to put a lot of stock into that. Your thoughts on Dulcich this year as a guy who is being drafted as tight end 17 at the end of the 11th round? Your thoughts on how well he could acclimate to the Sean Payton offense and become a big-time difference maker at tight end in redraft leagues this year, Coop?
It's been crazy with the news on this guy. And I've been trying to just stay back and absorb it all and try to figure out what to do with them. But it's even crazier. Like at Fantasy, even in-house with Fantasy Alarm, John Impemba loves Jerry Jeudy, and Howard Bender loves Cortland Sutton, and Britt Flynn loves Greg Dulcich. Well, you're probably only going to get 2 out of 3 at best, right? It's going to be I guess Russell Wilson could go nuclear, and all 3 guys are fantasy relevant, but you're probably going to get 2 out of 3. Right now, I'm a little worried with what they're talking about. But on the flip side, you had Sean Payton talk about him as the Joker, which Joker doesn't necessarily mean Alvin Kamara. For a while, the Joker was Jimmy Graham, just basically a guy you can play out of position. What scares me is if people say he's lost, maybe the problem is that now he has to learn the tight end playbook and the wide receiver playbook, and maybe he's not picking it up. For the time being, he scares me a little bit. But in Dynasty, I'm holding him and potentially trading for him if need be, because converted wide receivers that have flashed in the league are exactly what we want. That's how we got Darren Waller, right? That's Logan Thomas was a quarterback. Like, if you can get me a guy that's playing wide receiver that I can start at tight end, that's what I want. So in Dynasty, I'm more interested. In redraft, I'm kind of steering away.
We had news about a week and a half ago, maybe it's 2 weeks or so ago now. Maybe it wasn't even that. But Jimmy Graham made his way back to New Orleans. And I don't want to bring him up from a fantasy standpoint because he's not even being drafted right now. But I think it's worthwhile mentioning the effect that he's going to have on Juwan Johnson, a player that I know many high-stakes players were higher on a month and a half ago, and he started to climb up ADP. He's still kind of up there. I mean, he's tight end 19 at the 1208 right now, ahead of Ferguson, Musgrave, Hunter Henry, Hurst, Likely, all those guys. Your thoughts on Juwan Johnson and sort of the impact that Graham is going to have on him? Or are you kind of out on Johnson and it really doesn't matter the impact that Graham has on him?
Yeah, I mean, we saw it with the Bears. Inexplicably gave him 10. Jimmy Graham, 10. Not even inexplicably. He's Jimmy Graham. So they just look at it and say, you know what, 10 end zone touchdown, 10 end zone targets, fine. That's the problem, because Juwan Johnson, that was what kept him afloat last year with 7 touchdowns. Me personally, this is one of those games where in this range, there's a lot of place your bets. David Njoku versus Elijah Moore, right? Chris Olave, we know is the top dog. A lot of people out there say Michael Thomas is going to get hurt or he stinks now or whatever. Well, my question is, what are you doing about it? You should invest in a Rashid Shaheed or a Juwan Johnson. Personally, I like Michael Thomas, which keeps me off of Juwan a little bit. And now them bringing in a rebounder to potentially go in for goal line sets makes it even scarier for me. So I'm kind of out on Juwan, even though there was a time where I was on Twitter, or now X, hitting up Yahoo and Sleeper and saying, get this guy tight end eligibility. Like we fought hard to get our Juwan Johnson at one point, and I have him in a lot of dynasty leagues because of that. But You gotta make your picks. And if somebody wanted to say to me, yeah, Michael Thomas thinks now he's going to get hurt, I like Juwan Johnson, I would say that's fair.
Yeah. And it makes sense, right? The last thing that I'll bring up is Isaiah Likely. You talked about how Dallas Goedert could be he has kind of dual upside, right? Because he's got standalone upside when Brown and Smith are healthy. But if either one of them were to miss time, then all of a sudden you stumbled into something with Goddard. Can you kind of compare that situation to the situation Likely is in Baltimore right now?
Yes. So Likely, the guy, so we always think like, who's going to be the next Mark Andrews? Likely kind of already is. Like they drafted him to be that. They use him like that. This guy Mark Andrews only blocked on one pass play last year. And you would think that the other tight end would be doing stuff like that. No. Isaiah Likely was used exactly the way he was. He only blocked on 2 pass plays. And when Isaiah Likely was out, when Andrews was out, Isaiah Likely stepped right in. He played 81% of his snaps from a wide receiver role. He was averaging 8 targets a game in those games. He's the one backup tight end. You forget the Noah Grays of the world, all these guys. He's the one backup tight end that I will immediately put in lineups if the starter gets hurt. The problem is an injury to a wide receiver doesn't necessarily unlock him the way it does Cade Otton or these other guys. It's really just the specific linear depth chart injury that unlocks him. But guys like Likely and Chigakonkwo, when I go deep into my spreadsheet cave, those guys have the alignment in terms of they play wide receiver. They have the explosiveness. Chig a little more so than Likely, but Likely looks great out there. They have the ADOT. They have everything, this machine that if you just feed it more snaps, you get more production out. Where some guys, because they block on a ton of pass plays and stuff, you could feed the Tyler Higbee machine at times or the Drew Sample machine. You can feed that machine 1 million snaps and you're never going to get production out because of the clunkiness and the blocking and all that. These guys, they just need the snaps. That's why the other day I tweeted free Isaiah Likely, nothing else, just that. Like if you could just trade him to the Rams to be their slot, they're the guy that actually runs routes, or trade him to the Dolphins, right? Like he could be a guy right away, but they would never trade him because they love Mark Andrews so much. Why wouldn't they love Mark Andrews?
And they know what they have in him, right? And we know what we have in Andrew Cooper. By the way, you are watching this, and I want to thank everybody who's watching this on YouTube. You can watch all the BSN live talk shows on the YouTube channel here for Better Sports Network. You can call in or live chat with the host and community. Thanks to everybody who participated tonight. Watch all our shows and see clips of our best moments and interviews on YouTube, Twitter, and at bettersports.com. Coop A Fiasco on Twitter /X. Certainly appreciate Andrew Cooper stopping by on consignment from Fantasy Alarm. Thank you so much, Cooper. Remind the viewers when they can see you here on BSN going forward.
Yeah, I'll be right back at it tomorrow, 9 a.m., 9 to 9:30. That show's funny. It's literally just like me, Corey Parson, and Britt Flynn arguing. That's a good one. We got to sneak you in there. You ever get up that early?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'll actually be on Sirius at like 6:30 tomorrow morning.
Awesome,
so
man.
I'm up. You guys ever need me or whatever, want me to have me on, I'm game for that.
And then what? Okay, I'm holding you to it. Then 1 to 2 Coop Fantasy Football Fiasco. We're talking robust RB with Dave Kluge, and then we're gonna after that it'll be me, Howard, and Britt from 2 to 3, just yucking it up and doing silly stuff. So it's gonna be a good day tomorrow.
Pay attention and learn and enjoy the frivolity. Thanks to Andrew Cooper and Anthony Rivera. We're back at 7/6 Central next week. Remember, myffpc.com is where to go for 2 separate $1 million grand prizes. Dynasty leagues available there as well. Dynasty Nerds with Garrett Price is up next. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll talk with you next week.